Donald Trump sues Maine's Shenna Bellows for throwing him off the ballot there in Maine. And we're going to go through the lawsuit, which was submitted to the Maine Superior Court. Not too long, just kind of simple, actually, saying, hey, here's what the Secretary of State's authority is, and here's what she did. And this is why it's unconstitutional. Her name, of course, is Shenna Bellows. She gets asked about this from CNN. Is what you're doing here good? Is it going to survive? People are asking, is this going to fracture the country on the Mika Brzezinski show? So she's saying, is there any backlash, and should we care anyways since he's a dictator? Raskin says Trump must be disqualified. But over on CNN, they're kind of hinting at this, saying all this removal stuff is not going to be good for our side. And Comer's recognizing this is election interference. And so let's jump right in to the filing. Donald Trump versus Shenna Bellows filing a complaint against her for a review of her so-called opinion. Remember, she's not a lawyer or a judge or anything even close. It's in the state of Maine, over to the Superior Court. Under an introduction, they tell us, all right, Superior Court of Maine, Donald Trump is here, and he's asking this court for a review of the final order issued by Shenna, calling it the ruling, the secretary's ruling, which I like. A copy is attached. We've already read through it, that she didn't write. Now, in response to a challenge, the Maine Secretary of State, Shenna, she removed Donald Trump from the Republican Party's primary ballot. She said that he is allegedly ineligible to be president under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And they say President Trump is not happy about this. They say he is aggrieved that the final order is out. Why? The secretary was a biased decision maker who should have recused herself. And we read through the recusal request from Trump's team before the ruling came out. She also otherwise failed to provide lawful due process because there was no real hearing that took place. And also, the secretary had no legal authority or any other Maine statute to consider the federal constitutional issues that were presented. And 3, she made multiple errors of law, go figure, no surprise there, acted in an arbitrary and capricious manner, and that President Trump will be illegally excluded from the ballot as a result of her actions. And so they continue. Trump states the following. Obviously, he is a petitioner, resident of the state of Florida, a candidate for president. And Shenna is Secretary of State of Maine. Now, Trump's upset. Why? Presidential ballot access is governed by this Maine law. For a placement on the ballot, candidates must submit petitions containing a certain number of signatures. It's undisputed that President Trump had a bunch of signatures because he's very popular. Now, in addition, it also requires a candidate to file a consent form. Each candidate has to complete a consent form. It says they must contain a statement signed by the candidate. The Secretary of State shall create a form, a single filing sufficient, declare your residence, and as required on the consent form, this is what it looks like. Here's what Trump filled out. He says, okay, all right, somebody's filling out for him. All right, Donald Trump, Republican loser party. Maybe they put MAGA party. I don't know what they put in there. Legal name, Trump. First name, Donald. Phonetic pronunciation, you know how to say it. Voting residence of the candidate. Okay, there that is. And hey, look at this. Here's the form. Qualifications for president. Donald Trump's saying, let me think. Am I a natural born citizen? Yeah. Have you been a resident of the United States for at least 14 years? Yeah, I got that one. Are you 35 years of age? Yeah, got that one too. That's it. 3 qualifications. Boom. There you go. U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 1 is their authority for that. So the candidate says, I hereby declare my intent to be a candidate for the president. And I want my name to be placed on the primary ballot to be held on March 5th, 2024 in the state of Maine. I further declare my residence in my municipality is above, and I am enrolled in the party name above. I meet the qualifications to hold this office listed above, and that this declaration is true. Boom. That's it. So then Trump says, okay, Donald J. Trump, and he, has that real kind of aggressive signature, which I dig, actually. It's great. Subscribed and sworn before me on this date, Notary Public. They sign it in there. And that's it. Got to get this all submitted by December 1st. That's it. It doesn't say anything in here about insurrection, right? No insurrection question. So there is no dispute that President Trump submitted his consent, his duly notarized form, all submitted. In fact, we've submitted it here if you want to look at it again. And by submitting this consent, Trump met all requirements set forth by the legislature. Okay, that's it. He was done. The form was completed. The law says it's the form. That's it. But nonetheless, the secretary denied Trump from going on the ballot. So here's the grounds. They say, look, relief is sought upon the grounds that this was a process that was infected by bias and pervasive lack of due process, calling it arbitrary, capricious, characterized by Bellows's abuse of discretion, errors of law, ultra vires, things outside, unsupported by substantial evidence on the record as follows. 1, secretary should have recused herself due to her bias. We documented her history. She was in that little, Spice Girls insurrection meeting where they were all having their, estrogen fest, whatever, talking about insurrection in their Secretary of State offices. responses. Weird debacle there, but they did it. Okay, Trump was an insurrectionist before this even landed on her desk. Secretary denied President Trump due process by failing to give him adequate time and opportunity to present a defense. Secretary lacked the statutory authority to hear the challenges directed by Trump's supposed disqualification. Said here, the law provides us with mechanisms to challenge this. Section 336 specifically says declarations, statements in here, but no challenge was made to Trump's place of residency. No challenge was made to Trump's party. And so the secretary had no authority to consider any challenge to Trump's qualifications because those qualifications are not on the form, right? In other words, the declaration, somebody could have challenged his declaration elsewhere. Now, even if the secretary could consider challenges to the statement portion of the consent, any challenge is limited to the plain text of the form by the secretary. That's it. In other words, it's on the form. I filled out the form. That's the end of the discussion. The limited scope of the statement means that any claim about Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it's not there. It has no bearing on anything on the consent form, much less the declaration. The secretary had no authority to consider the challenges raised under the 14th Amendment. If they want to change the form, they can. So by exceeding the scope of what Maine legislature said, here, Trump's sworn statement was factually true. And so it was an error of law. It was an abuse of discretion for her to find it false. And now all of the evidence on which she relied was also irrelevant. None of these issues were before her. She abused her discretion by relying on untrustworthy evidence that came from the January 6th committee. Even if Maine authorized the secretary to consider challenges to Trump's candidacy, which it did not, the secretary could not have properly considered Section 3. Why? Disqualification of a president is a political question reserved for the Electoral College in Congress, and the 14th Amendment is not self-executing. That has not been established. Section 3 also, they say, bars persons otherwise subject to its disqualification from holding specified offices, not from running for them. By barring Trump, she violated that case. Another error. Section 3 also does not apply to the president because he never served as the officer of the United States. And it doesn't apply to him because that position is not an office, the presidency. Trump did not engage in an insurrection, and so this insane Maine secretary has said that as evidence of Trump's conduct, she relied entirely on his public speeches. Those speeches did not incite an insurrection, and they were protected by the First Amendment. And so now we demand that you vacate Superior Court, Shenna Bellows' authority, her opinion, her ruling, and declare that she has no jurisdiction, no authority to maintain any of these proceedings under the 14th Amendment, and require her to immediately place Trump back on the ballot during the primaries and grant any other relief that we deem appropriate. Signed by Bruce Helpler. Shout out to Bruce from Portland, Scott Gessler, and Gary Lakowski. Bruce is signing on behalf of all of them, submitting this filing, this complaint against Shenna Bellows, the Maine secretary who removed Trump from the proceedings. Now, here is the question for her. They asked her, is this going to survive? Is this all just a big show? Are you just trying to attack your political opponents? Here was the conversation with her on CNN.
Will survive this appeal by Trump and possibly survive the Supreme Court?
Thank you for having me. What I think is important to recognize is this is the process in Maine. Maine is unlike other states whereby anyone, a registered voter who challenges a candidate's qualifications, must appeal to the Secretary of State. I did my job that I was required to do under Maine law and the Constitution in holding a hearing and issuing a decision. The next step under the law is this appeal to Maine Superior Court, and then the Maine Supreme Judicial Court, and then the U.S. Supreme Court. And I, on the last page of my decision, suspended the effect of my decision.
Why?
Pending the court process, because that is what's important, the rule of law and the Constitution.
Okay.
Do you think?
Well, they said that you don't have any authority to even consider this stuff, right? The Maine legislature told you what you could put on there. You put it on there, and now you just added another bullet point in there because you wanted to get rid of him.
It will survive the Supreme Court?
I'm going to follow the will of the courts. I don't know what the courts will do. Whatever the courts will do, I'm going to follow the law and follow the court's direction. Certainly welcome the United States Supreme Court to weigh in.
If they disagree with you, what will that mean?
If they disagree with me, Trump will be on the ballot. And like I said, I stayed my decision pending the appeal because it's important that the process play out. That's what our laws require.
Okay, so doesn't actually say much, right? Always deferring back to the process. I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing my obligation. No, you weren't. You didn't have to go through that and conduct a hearing on it. You could say, hey, under the Maine legislature, it says I consider these things. I don't have jurisdiction to consider your particular challenge. Take it up with someone else. else. But she wanted to remove Trump. We've seen her palling around with Jenna Griswold and all of the other secretaries of states at their little, entourage meeting. So she really doesn't care what it does to the country. She's just doing her job. She'll get her deal. She'll write a book about it. I'm under attack. You know how this goes. Raskin is saying that Trump is disqualified. He's been on this bench for a while. Trump's got to go. They've got no other responsive strategy to get rid of him. So this is the number 2 attack. He's also on CNN saying the law's very clear. You swore an oath to the Constitution and you've got to uphold it. Here's Raskin.
Not just Republicans, though, coming out against this. We've heard Democrats and independents as well saying that they're not comfortable with this. Are you comfortable with one state official making a unilateral decision to take a presidential candidate off the ballot?
Well, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, so we're all governed in our democracy under the rules of the Constitution.
Which is why Jack Smith has to go.
And it was actually 2 very conservative legal scholars who wrote the best, most authoritative law review article on the whole thing, saying that Donald Trump is clearly disqualified from being on the ballot because he...
A law review article. Okay, so couple people somewhere
participated in insurrection. So this becomes a test for the originalists and the textualists on the Supreme Court. And I think all of the justices from left to right call themselves textualists and originalists. The language of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is very clear. It says if you've sworn an oath to support the Constitution and violated the oath by engaging in insurrection or rebellion,
do you think he should be off
you can
the
never
ballot?
hold public office again. And the original purposes of it are equally clear because actually when the language was first offered by the radical Republicans in Congress, it was very broad and it said if you've participated in secession or insurrection, you can never vote again. And when it got over to the Senate, they said that's way too broad. Let's focus in on the worst offenders, people who'd actually sworn an oath to the Constitution and then breached the oath by trying to overthrow the government. And we'll make sure those people never serve in office again. They can vote again. Donald Trump can vote forever as long as he lives, but he has
unless they convict him of a felony with their fake sham trial.
Qualified himself. And we have a number of disqualifications in the Constitution for serving as president. For example, age. I mean, I've got a colleague who's a great young politician, Maxwell Frost. He's 26. He can't run for president.
Wow.
Now, would we say that that's undemocratic? Well, that's the rules of the Constitution. If you don't like the rules of the
That's his argument? It's the age limit thing? Okay, so Raskin obviously does not want to answer that question, so he's just babbling around about process. Well, no, constitutional rules and all this stuff. So Trump, he's saying that, yes, we got to throw Trump off the ballot, okay? We're petrified of the guy. He's going to beat us. He's going to expose our fake J6 committee. We're all going to be busted big time. And so they're just petrified. Now, here's another one. This one, the Mika and Joe Brzezinski show. She brought on this guy. He is also on MSNBC. Tom S. Elliott grabbed this one for us. Dave Arenberg over on MSNBC, he came on for some reason. He says the Constitution of ours has to mean something. Now, I think it's undemocratic to allow people to run for office who aren't qualified to do so. Right? They want him gone. And Mika doesn't really care about the ramifications of this because they hate Trump so much. They're demented. Listen.
There could be a backlash, and that's something that might need to be considered, some might say. Is a Supreme Court justice or a Superior Court judge looking at backlash, or are they supposed to? What's the job? I bring it down.
Well, they're looking at something called justice. They're looking at things like due process. And so when your side breaks those things, like when you break the Constitution, when you shatter 234 years of precedent, when you do all those things, it's not necessarily that we're mad that you're going after Trump per se. Like if there was a legitimate thing that you were doing, like we wouldn't have much to say about it, honestly. Like what would this whole show be about? We'd have nothing to talk about if it was legitimate. It's not that interesting, actually, when it is legitimate. But what people are having a backlash to is the corruption of the process. It is the weaponization of the process. That's what we're upset about, Mika, just to be clear.
Down to if you discipline a child for getting into a fight, do you go, maybe I won't discipline the child because other kids might get mad?
Yeah, but we're not children,
is
Mika.
the job to worry about backlash, or is the job to decide whether or not President Donald Trump, former President Trump, engaged in insurrection and therefore is not qualified to be on the ballot?
That's not for your illegitimate DOJ, Jack Smith, who's not even lawfully appointed to decide.
Good morning, Mika. It's not supposed to be considered the political backlash. That's why you give federal judges and justices lifetime appointments. They're not supposed to put their finger up to the wind, see which way it's going. Now, state judges may get elected, but they too are not supposed to take into account the political consequences or the polls. And I know that some are saying, as you discussed, that this is undemocratic to take the matter away from voters. But as Charlie said, this Constitution of ours has to mean something, right? I think it's undemocratic to allow people to run for office who aren't qualified to do so. If Barack Obama...
Who gets to decide who's qualified? disqualified. The Democrats do. Merrick Garland does. Joe Biden does. And Jack Smith does. Unelected prosecutors appointed, who's a private citizen, not even lawfully appointed. They just get to decide, well, we think that you committed something that disqualifies you from running. Like how that works?
Obama announced he was running for president this year. Republicans would light their hair on fire, right? And they'd have a point. The 22nd Amendment to the Constitution says you have a maximum of 2 terms. He does not qualify to run, even though the voters may want him. And Trump, ironically, built his political brand.
That's how you know these people have no argument. It's because they just point to other qualifications in the Constitution that are clearly cut and dry, like you can't run for a 3rd term. Okay, that's not what we're talking about here. This is one political party keeping off an opponent using their discretionary rule that they just made up that happens to apply to Trump. Nobody has any questions about age 35, except I think the person in Maine or Colorado. One of them thought it was 40. I forget who. But that's how you know their argument is bad, is because they just keep going over to, well, you can't have 3rd terms. My 8-year-old can't run the country. Okay, nice argument there. So, all right, that's from MSNBC. They don't really care about what this does to the country. Now, CNN, Jake Tapper, he's pointing to these two who are on here, and he says, you know, every time Donald Trump gets indicted, every time we see a situation where he gets removed from the ballot, it seems like things continue to get better for him. Like, actually, he's going up in the polls when we go after him. What say you?
First of all, let's talk about our top story today. Trump's legal team is appealing the decision by Maine Secretary of State to try to remove him from the state's primary ballot. We've never seen anything like this. Of course, we've also never seen a president actually trying to foment violence at the Capitol to stop the counting of votes. What do you make of it?
I continue to believe that every time these states take him off the ballot, whether the primary or eventually if he becomes the nominee, try to do it for the general, that it would be appropriate for the Supreme Court to intervene, because I don't think that in this case it's good for voters to not have the chance to decide that they don't want to have Donald Trump. But I frankly think it would be politically smart for Joe Biden to come out and say, everybody who is on my side, I get it. I've said that what I think he did that day was insurrection, but I'm not afraid of this guy. And I think voters are going to choose me in the end. I think that'd be politically savvy.
Yeah, but they are afraid, though. They're petrified of the dude.
What do you think?
I agree with that point. I would love to see him say, I'm not afraid of him. I'm going to take you on. Let's do this. But I do think what's interesting about the Maine case is, remember, he was on CNN earlier today. The gentleman who brought the case is a Republican state senator who had voted for Trump, who was so horrified by January 6th that he filed this. He didn't think he should be on the ballot.
So what?
What's important about that is we are seeing in the polls, we saw in that big New York Times poll, there are increasingly voters, Republican independents, who say a conviction would be a factor that would have them not vote for Trump. And I think, as these cases start, because,
that's getting smaller and smaller, by the way. Okay, we looked at more of this on our members only stream at Locals on the morning. You can also be a member on YouTube. We were seeing that more and more people had doubts or having doubts about Joe Biden's legitimacy as president. The 2021 numbers are a lot different than the 2023 numbers. Everyone in 2000, I guess he's legitimate. Not so much anymore. Now, it's not a majority of the country yet, but it is trending in the right direction because people are wondering how they were able to shove this guy into the office under our noses.
Matt, the calendar didn't show the court dates in between all the court dates.
Right.
We're learning lots of new information every week. I expect that pace is going to kick up.
That's true.
Here in January. And we don't know what impact that may have on general election voters in the way that we're seeing, though, in the primary. Trump is obviously doing quite well.
Okay, so she didn't really answer the question about what should happen here, but I agree with CNN, actually, that it would be a good move for Joe Biden to come out and say something like that. This is wrong. We stand for democracy. We want democracy in America. That means everybody votes. But they don't want that at all. They don't want him on the ballot. They want him in prison. They want him convicted so the party takes him off, or so that the voters think that, he's such a criminal that they are dissuaded, or they're literally trying to keep him off the ballot now in multiple states, right? That's how they play, because they're cheaters. And this is all about election interference. James Comer confirms this. He says, look, this has been going on for a long time. Okay, the DOJ has been covering up for Joe Biden. The whistleblowers have confirmed that for us. They buried the story on the Hunter Biden laptop with the aid of ex-CIA intelligence idiots. We saw them censor people with FBI agents sending Twitter messages to Twitter to remove their stuff. All is happening right now. We're not going to wake up in 2024 in November and wonder if the feds interfered with the election, because they are doing it right now. There's court filings about it in multiple cases. Okay, the DOJ colludes with the FBI on all their cases, right? The FBI raided Trump and gave all the documents to the DOJ. say, and that's it. So they've already been interfering with this since August 8th, 2022.
But I'll tell you, it's good for every member of Congress, especially me, to be back home during Christmas, listening to average Americans. And I'm here in Kentucky right now, and if you ask the average Kentuckian about the Democrats and what they're trying to do right now, especially with respect to the presidential race, they'll say two things. First of all, they think it's absurd what the Democrats are trying to do in blue states in banning President Trump from the ballot. I mean, this is clearly election interference. And then the second thing that the average person on the street will say about the Democrats in this presidential race is they've got a problem with their candidate, Joe Biden. Poll after poll shows that the Americans believe his policies are bad, and that even worse for Joe Biden, he's a crook. I think that the Democrats are trying to do everything they can in a last-ditch effort to disrupt the Republican momentum right now heading into the presidential election. I think this is another example of that, and I hate to say it, Jason, but I fear we're going to see more blue states pull stunts like this.
Yep, because that's all they've got. They are running out of other options. And so we'll see what the Supreme Court says. Of course, we're going to have a lot more to cover here. The dominoes are starting to fall, and we're going to see where this all goes. And so thank you for subscribing as we continue to cover this, my friends. And thanks for sharing this video. Thanks for sharing our channel with a friend or family member, sharing a short over there, telling them, hey, we're covering all of the actual documents, all the Trump litigation, and we're having a little fun while we're doing it. We also have our website, robertgovea.com. So if you want to read any of the documents, the PDFs are up there, robertgovea.com, links in the description. We've got our new fitness challenge at the lodge at watchyourlodge.com. So it's not too late to sign up. Come and join us. We have prizes. We're going to be giving away some cool stuff in the first week of February. For those of you who want to participate, I dropped my day 3 report at watchyourlodge.com. And so drop your report in there as well, and we'll check in, make sure we're getting our fitness in this new year, because we are going to be stronger and healthier than the tyrants out there across America. And so, my friends, we will be here continuing to cover this. Thank you for subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.